And now we are going to our blockchain panel with very distinguished panelists. Please go on stage. The topic of the blockchain panel is blockchain competition to government. I take this one. I take this one. Okay, let's start with our distinguished guest, Mr. Olivier Bringer. He is head of unit at the deputy and acting head of the next generation internet unit at the Director General Connect of the Commission of the European Union. Welcome. Then could you please introduce yourself and say a few words?
Okay. So those of you who are here at the workshop on artificial intelligence see me again. So I hope I won't bore you. Yes, I'm in charge of the Next Generation Internet Initiative in the Commission. You had an overview of the initiative yesterday in the speech of our Commissioner, Maria Gabriel. So the purpose of the initiative is really to build an internet that serves the humans. So an internet that is trustworthy, that is sustainable, that is secure, that is inclusive. And for that, we think that we need to master the technologies, because of course, if the technologies come from elsewhere, we don't really have a say on their design. So one key technology of this next generation internet is blockchain, and the way we see it is that it will allow to increase the decentralization of the internet. It will allow more direct interactions between people, and it will increase user control. So we see it as a key building block of the future internet. We are really at the start of our reflection on blockchain. We started around cryptocurrency, but now we are also reflecting about the technology. The important point is that we really want to invest in the technology. We think that's very important, that we look into the technology itself, that we look into the way it can be used in different use cases, and those use cases are unlimited. I mean, it goes from cryptocurrency, everyone knows it, financial sector, to public administration, but also many other areas, healthcare, logistics. So we, this is the point where we stand, and I could say a bit more on the different initiatives we have launched later on.
Thank you, Olivier. I would like to continue with Mariam Durashvili. She is presenting us the Georgian land registry project that is using blockchain, one of the first projects that does this. You have the podium.
Thank you. Is it working?
It's not working yet. Can you put on the mic? One, two. Take this one.
This one? Okay, I think this works. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for having me here. So first I will talk about the National Agency of Public Registry, which is the legal entity of public law under the Ministry of Justice. It was established in 2004, and our main functions, together with the land registry and the property registration, we also register the business there, registry of entrepreneurial and non-entrepreneurial legal entities. We also have mapping, geodesy, and cadastre, also tax land mortgage registration. We also register the political parties of the citizens and municipalities. Establishment of National Agency of Public Registry was the most important steps towards taken to the systematization of the real estate related information in Georgia. So for that purpose, comprehensive changes and reforms has been taken place and also are still ongoing in the NAPR, mainly in 4 major directions, which is institutional, technological, administrative, and legislative. But the emphasis was put on making registration procedure simpler and faster using modern information technologies. That's how we came to blockchain. So Georgia was... yeah,
Can use the slides.
thanks. Okay. So Georgia is one of the first countries that started using blockchain technology, and we so far are using it for our land registry, private property registry. Many countries, when they start thinking about using blockchain technology, usually they want it for corruption elimination purposes. But in our case, it was not the reason. You can check that Georgia has really high positions in World Bank doing business rankings, and also in Corruption Perception Index, we have improved our position. In our case, the main product what we have is the land title, extract from the land registry. Information about property ownership, according to Georgian legislation, is public and it's accessible for everyone. It's published on our website. So storing it, like having them on our servers and also having them public on the website, gives us the guarantees and gives us the protection. But we wanted to provide higher level of security, higher level of protection, and that's how we came to blockchain technology. So why blockchain? Let's say if previously information was protected within the country, we wanted to have the international levels of security. So how is it done? Well, I will not read the slides, probably you can see it there. How it's done. We have not changed our existing system. We do not have our private blockchain. As you already heard from Vlad, we use the public global blockchain. And after we issue the extract, which is our main product, the hash code is generated for each extract, and this hash code is relevant only for this specific extract. And after this hash code is sent to a blockchain system. And if you will check it, then this identical hashes in the blockchain of Bitcoin and on an APR website can verify the authenticity of the extract. This is very brief how it's done because I do not have much time to talk about that. So then later we started thinking, like, is this the only thing, like the storing function, is this the only benefit we can get from blockchain technology? Of course not. The technology is, these capacities and the possibilities of technology is very broad. So but first we wanted this pilot project to check the compatibility of the system to our, the compatibility of the technology to our system. So then we started the phase 2, which are smart contracts. Smart contracts means, so there are 3 parties engaged in smart contracts, an APR, bank, and the blockchain system provider. In our case, it's Bitfury Group. The main problem sometimes we have there is when to pay money. So, you know, according to the Georgian legislation, the transaction takes 4 days, maximum 4 days. So citizens are often confused when to pay for the property when they are buying, when they are submitting the documents or after transaction is already completed. So now the transaction registration and the money transfer will take place like together. So if the transaction is successful, then the seller gets the money. If the transaction is rejected, then the money is returned to the buyer. This is, for now, we hope that the first product we will have in the late this autumn, I guess. For the future, we are already thinking about automatization of the processes, the whole processes. So we want, there will not be a necessity of use notary offices, any certified documents or stamps. They will not be needed anymore. And also the citizens will not have to address an APR at all, and they can do it with their smartphones, with smart applications and smart contracts. I just want to tell a bit more about the challenges we have in this process. First of all, of course, it's the legislation cannot always follow the fast development of the technologies, but we are working on blockchain-related regulations together with the ministry and the international organizations. Another, of course, public awareness is also the problem just simply to explain what is blockchain and why do we need it if everything was so secured before. It's not easy, but well, we are trying. And one more is that they often ask about the cryptocurrencies. Of course, blockchain is related to cryptocurrencies, but the technology itself is absolutely independent. So we do not have our own cryptocurrency, and we are not planning to have it. So the technology has developed so far and is probably will be developing much more because, well, it's interesting for everyone, for governments, for public, private sector, for individuals, as long as it's fast, simple, and comfortable. I think that's all my time can allow.
Thank you very much, Mariam. I think it's a great project, and thank you very much for the presentation. Next, we have Viktor Dubnevich. He is a lawyer, he's a legal entrepreneur, he's active in legal tech, and most important for us here, he is active in the blockchain projects going on in Ukraine. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that?
Thank you. Hi everyone, it's a pleasure to take part on today's discussion. So I am a Ukraine-based lawyer, and I with my team work a lot with blockchain projects. We provide legal support for them and have an interesting statistics. During the last year in Ukraine, we launched 19 ICO projects, which have collected approximately $160 million. And not one of them is incorporated in Ukraine. All of them are incorporated abroad. And it's really a huge market, it's really huge brains in Ukraine, but there is no any legal framework. So we work a lot with developing these legislative processes. We prepare blockchain bills for solving this problem and for getting more efficiency Ukrainian economy. Another things where I'm involved in is legal tech. We have our own project named PatentBot, where you can register your trademark in 10 minutes. And also we have plans to use blockchain technology for protecting your IP rights here. And maybe during our panel discussion, we will discuss about this experience also. Thank you.
Thank you. Victor, next we have Walid Al-Sakaf. He's a senior lecturer from Södertörn University in Sweden and also quite active at ISOC.
Thank you. Hello. Yes, thank you, Jörn. In fact, yes, indeed, you'll notice I have two hats here, and I'm having to wear them both because I've taken time from my full-time job at the university to be here, and also ISOC is supporting my travel. On the other hand, I'd like to also note that my academic role as a senior lecturer at Södertörn University is closely knit, because as academics, we don't take things for granted. We have to study them, learn how they operate. And I tended to look into blockchain as one of the areas I'd like to study. I'd like to understand whether this technology is truly the real deal, or it's hyped, is it a bubble, is it not? So I take things rather objectively in that sense. And so I cover blockchain technology in my academic capacity as a researcher in understanding how it can improve aspects of media technology. In particular, can it improve the, let's say, the detection of fake news, which is a big thing nowadays, and also the proof of, let's say, the proof of creation, and is it possible to use that as a way to preserve intellectual property right? And so these are the areas I cover on the academic side. On the ISOC side, I am often called the blockchain guy on the board of trustees of ISOC. Anything to do with blockchain is, and I've been trying to argue that the internet itself is very instrumental for developing the blockchain. But the reason for that is the common characteristics of the blockchain, the decentralization, equality of access, transparency, all have been inherited, those of the internet have been inherited to the blockchain. And in some sense, it is like some sort of grandchild of the internet. So it has very similar traits, and the same people who developed Bitcoin had somewhat very similar affiliation, let's say, mindsets of those who are early adopters of the early internet and in the times of the bulletin boards and the Usenet, if some of you remember. So the same mentality of openness, equality, access, distribution, not having a central point of control, not having a mechanism of censorship. So the characteristics that have been inherited to the blockchain make it rather appealing on the internet layer. So these are the two areas that I've been involved in, and I'm happy throughout the discussion to go more into how governments can deal with it.
Thank you, Walid. Next, we thought to have Susan Tempelhoff here. She couldn't make it. I'm sorry for that. And last and not least, we have Olga Duka here. She is a crypto entrepreneur, a crypto enthusiast, and CEO of Zeus hybrid exchange that connects financial market with cryptos. You have the stage.
Hello, thank you. Good day to everyone. I'm happy to be here, and we've had fascinating conversations for the last 2 days on what blockchain could change. We have our very special take on this one, and this take, our product which we're building, is based on 4 major trends which we see, either challenges, trends which we think we can answer to, or which eventually influence the industry we're working with right now, which is fintech, but also will influence other industries as well. One is the sharing economy and the future of cities, and it seems to be bringing inequality as the old economy did. But the power of blockchain may create this future distributed sharing economy with possibilities for everyone. And we are rather interested in the implications of blockchain to this future trend. Another one is the future of governance. And what we see right now is the whole governance, the concept of it is changing. And public services in some way become the future blue oceans for business. In some way, governance is going digital, and blockchain technologies may be used to empower this one. But we also can see multiple questions on where the government controls it, or where the business controls it, or where the society controls it, and how they all are in a dialogue. The third one, which we seem important, is the concept of the future identity, the digital identity. Obviously, we have many people in this room, I'm pretty sure, have the idea of how they want to treat their personal data. And currently, the discussions about the digital identity seem very important. Finally, the future of markets and the cryptocurrency and blockchain technologies brought in a completely new models of economy. We don't know yet, we don't yet understand. And it seems that in the next few years, we would eventually figure out how it should be working. So based on those challenges, we have our own use case, our own answer as a product. It's a hybrid financial platform, which connects financial markets and crypto. And our answer to those challenges is that on one point, we highly welcome regulation in financial markets and in crypto markets as well. On the other side, we would love to see the governance may run on smart contracts to exclude bureaucracy, to exclude bribery and corruption we've seen around the globe. And then on digital identity, as far as I understand, that identity is also a question of sovereignty of the government and a question of national borders. I do believe that our private data belongs to us, and our platform will be the first one to adopt such a digital identity when it will be eventually implemented, and it obviously can run on blockchain. We are here for a hope of a dialogue on the prospection of regulation, because that's probably the only way we can figure out how the future will shape. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga. I think it's a real game changer now that governments are ready to commit to blockchain, that governments are ready to say we will be bound by a blockchain that we cannot exclusively control, and that we will be bound by. So we cannot manipulate as we might like, but we are bound by our own rules. My first question is, of course, what is the position of the European Commission on blockchain regulation, use of blockchain? Should we regulate more? Should we have more freedom? What is the position? There are three over there.
Yes, it's a very important question. So for the moment, I would say we are rather cautious. So what we do for sure is that we want to invest in the, as I said, in the technologies. So we have already funded 80 million euros of projects on blockchain and services that use blockchain, and we are going to fund 300 more million euros until the end of 2020 to fund blockchain projects. And we think this is very important because this is the way to look into the issue of how to improve the architecture of blockchain, how to make sure it's secure, how to ensure it's scalable, because it's a distributed system, so it's a challenge to scale it at the level of the full internet. How to make sure that it does not use too much energy. In the description of the workshop, you say Bitcoin uses more energy, more electricity than Switzerland. That's quite impressive. So this is really something we believe strongly in, and we are going to invest, and we are going to invest even more in the next budget of the European Union, which will be the detail of which will be disclosed today and tomorrow. Then I say we are cautious because we are looking at the markets. For that, we have launched what we call an observatory and forum on blockchain. So it's a multi-stakeholder group. You have regulators, you have technologists, you have civil society, academia, and they are going to help us. We have launched it with the support of the European Parliament. That's important. And this group of people are going to help us look into how blockchain can be used in different sectors, including the public sector. Look into issues of interoperability, because I mean, blockchain is a technology that grows. You have different kinds of blockchain, so how to ensure interoperability. How to have in place the right legal framework. So this group is going to advise us on that. And another important initiative is that we have, or the member states, 24 of them, have agreed a declaration on blockchain. And they have agreed that they would collectively discuss those issues, discuss interoperability, and try to build a pan-European blockchain infrastructure. So we are going to do that by financing it through an instrument which is called Connecting Europe Facility. So it's an instrument we use to build highways to connect countries, but we do it also at the digital level. So in that case, we would try to have the right connector between a blockchain system developed by government in different countries to provide cross-border services. So that's a very important development. We are all on the same page. We want to avoid member states, Commission. We want to avoid divergent approaches. On the contrary, we want to be as harmonized as possible. And then just maybe to finish on on cryptocurrencies. So we had a fintech action plan that we issued in the spring, and there as well we have said that we would look into the market developments. We would work with the European financial supervisory authorities to see whether we need to intervene or not in these specific under financial rules. For sure, blockchain brings huge opportunities. It allows, for example, to raise funds through ICOs, initial coin offerings. But there are also risks. I mean, when you look at the fluctuation of the value of Bitcoin, for example, it brings risks for consumers and investors. So we need to see how to address those risks. But the idea is really to have a framework that favors innovation, because we are at the very start. So we have to nurture those people who are developing the technologies, who are developing the use cases, and that's really in the interest of the European consumer.
Thank you, Olivier. Well, what do you think on the panel? And please prepare your questions in the audience as well. We will take questions from the audience. Do we need more regulation? Shall we use blockchain in government more? What kind of regulation do we need? Or do we need more freedom to use blockchain? Are there hurdles in the current law that we need to remove? If you could provide a brief answer on your state there. Do you want to start?
Yes.
So I think that if we speak about the regulation of blockchain and cryptocurrency, we need to understand what is the start point of this process. And I would like to explain an interesting project, on my opinion, which can replace notaries. Its name is AppProof. It's a mobile application which you can use for enter into any contract.
Can you just be brief for the regulation?
Yes, and I finished about this. Yes.
Okay.
So you can use it. You can have some conversation with your with other party and record this conversation and hash it and record into blockchain. But if we spoke about the legal status of this record, whether it will be an agreement and whether we will get money in bank if we show this record, we face a lot of problems because there is no any regulations. And I think that the point is that the start point is that we need to define such opportunities of this technology, and then need to make some checklist of what we need to regulate for open these opportunities into the market.
Okay. Mariam, you said already that the law is a bit behind technology. So you're asking for more regulation or for more laws or more...
No.
Take the other mic, please.
So I was not talking about regulations. Just to give you a brief example, what I meant in legislation is far a bit behind. For example, our civil code implies that the agreement between the parties should be in written form and in understandable language for both. So is this code, which is used in smart contracts, in a written language understandable for both parties? No. So we need to adjust the legislation to follow the development of the technology. That's what I meant in the regulations. I will answer to your second question about should governments use blockchain more or not. I think they should, and we are also planning to expand a bit. NAPR wants to become kind of a hub in the country. So the next what we're planning will be the business registry, to integrate the business registry. Also other governmental organizations are addressing us, and we're very happy to share our knowledge and experience. And blockchain should be used by different organizations because, again, it's fast, it's secure, and it gives the higher protection and trust. So.
Thank you. Olga, you are active in quite a lot of different countries. When you compare them to Europe, do you think Europe is ready ahead, or
A good question. Actually, my general take on regulation is that there is a regulation and there is an execution of that regulation. And if regulation is done by experts and the society, one way or another, the execution of this could go to blockchain in full, whichever it's self-regulation or central or decentralized one. We are going to Europe and we're looking for, we are researching at least Malta, also Germany and Switzerland for the regulation which is applicable to our platform. But you have to understand that we are a hybrid, which means that we use both licenses from financial world, like broker-dealer or custodian, and we also apply crypto licenses such as crypto exchange or the transmission of digital assets. And we need both. It's not the question of if the Europe is ready or any other country. It's the question if we can use different sets of licenses in a particular regulation. We're very much looking forward to Malta. We're quite interested in what is going on in Zug. But it seems that even if we would be able to launch in Malta soon, we would have to wait for Switzerland for at least a couple of years, because we not only need the crypto licenses, but also financial licenses as well. So
okay.
we have a specific angle to this.
Thank you. Walid, what do you think?
I think that governments tend to over-regulate. And one of the problems with new technology is that it's better, in my opinion, to not regulate than to regulate in a wrong way. And usually regulating a technology that's still evolving in itself right now without even having it mature enough would be like shooting yourself in the foot. Because the government itself was about to adopt it, and now it's regulating something that is not yet adopted. So it doesn't make sense. It's measured responses need to be accounted for. And one of the important aspects of new disruptive technologies is that by nature they are disruptive. So the low legacy regulations might not even work on them. The way the internet was never the way governments were never able to stop the internet from allowing people to have long distance conversations. You may remember, many of us remember, governments were furious when the citizens were able to bypass their international carriers and have conversations without paying the fees that they are supposed to. And so in the same way, governments had to give up. And later, albeit, of course, quite late, adapted the technology and have their own ways of using it in their favor. So I feel that history is repeating itself. The governments need not to rush and take a step back and look into it and understand the technology. And I'd like to emphasize and appreciate the fact that the European Commission had established this the observatory and forum, because that is a sign that they like to learn first. And if you've seen the testimony of Zuckerberg at the Senate, you will understand the gap between technologists and bureaucrats. Sometimes it's really huge, and so it's necessary to take a step back and look at it and study it carefully before rushing into decisions.
Okay. One more question before I turn to the public is, can we extend it without problem from registry of land, from businesses, to registry of IDs? That's a big question now, where human rights are involved. It's not anymore about business, but of course, can you have multiple identities? Can you be traced on the blockchain? What about your privacy? So a short slant, should we extend it to digital identities on a blockchain? Do you want to start?
I'm not technically competent to say whether blockchain is the right tool, but for sure, in the internet of the future, we need to master. People need to control their identity. They need to be able to be anonymous when they want. They need to be able to give their full credentials when they want. They need to do it for the purpose they like, for social good or for commercial purpose. So we need a strong digital identity is important in the internet of the future. Blockchain probably offers some solutions. There might be others as well. In Europe, we have this framework which is called the EuroDiG regulation, and I think it's also a good basis. It's technology neutral, but it's also a good basis to develop European electronic identities. But for sure, there will be a need for trusted third parties that manage your identity online. Yes.
Olga, do you think EIDAS is ready for blockchain?
I don't think I'm competent to say if someone is ready except our own team. But digital identity can potentially be, there are two things to that. Again, regulation and execution of regulation. Technology-wise, I can imagine digital identity working right away. The distribute data on multiples of computers in a chain belonging to a person run on smart contracts. So whichever moment I want to give away my personal data, I countersign this one, and then it goes decrypted from multiple computers in the chain. So it doesn't belong to anyone, but it belongs to me. And at the same time, it's crypted enough. If it's possible, even this concept idea, if it's possible to implement right now, I don't know. It really depends on the governments and on the government's take on the identity, which in a way define national border, and then that's a question of how we are thinking about the future of national borders as well. So.
Okay, Walid, you wanted to comment?
Yes, and I think that question here is coming back to the characteristics of the blockchain. One of the characteristics of the blockchain is empowering the end user being the ultimate person whose data is being stored. So if I were, let's say I had a wallet and I have information in that wallet, so it is me who can decrypt using my own private key that information. So the minute that right is taken away in some way or the other, it's no longer the same concept that originally had been emphasized in the Satoshi Nakamoto paper of Bitcoin. And so it turns to another set of blockchains called private blockchains, where others are acting as your agency on the blockchain. Is it suitable or not? That's not my, I can't answer to that, but it's a totally different paradigm, a totally different mindset. So you move from the original concept of total transparency in terms of being end user peer-to-peer to giving agency to someone else acting on your behalf, which is, if you think about it, it is actually going back to the database system. Exactly. It's another form of database, even slower database, maybe more secure database, but it's eventually not you who is in charge. So that's the problem.
Okay. Thank you. We have one question from the public. Can you use the mic, please?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lyra, and I'm a crypto-anarchist. I'm sorry, but nobody mentioned the core ideology behind blockchain, cryptocurrencies, and all the technologies that are connected in that system. So crypto-anarchy is the responsible for a blockchain, and we are really glad to see that government has some cravings from the crypto-anarchistic side. The second thing, I have a few questions. What do you think about surveillance from the government on the blockchain model? Like we can monitor and trigger humans like cattle, maybe? And the second one is, do you think, somebody mentioned the ecological impact of the Bitcoin, I'm not sure who, but doesn't you think that fiat money or the mining of the gold produced and consume more energy than mining of cryptocurrencies? I will try to be short, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Who wants to answer? Do you?
I think I have to answer. On the, I mean, I cannot compare whether blockchain uses more energy than a centralized system. I just quote this figure, which I find very, very telling, and I hear that the distributed nature of blockchain makes it more energy hungry. So this is something we have to address. It doesn't mean, it's not something that we cannot address. We will address it. We need to research it, and we need to see if we can use, for example, we are now thinking at deploying high-performance computing, so very powerful computers in Europe. Can we use that to make blockchain more efficient? Maybe that's a solution. And the first point was, I lost track on
surveillance, yes.
Oh yes, surveillance, that's more complicated. But the blockchain is encrypted, right?
No. Most blockchains are open, transparent, and only the security is encrypted, meaning that when you do Bitcoin transactions, for example, you're not at all anonymous. And there exists a lot of tracking tools that actually do tracking of Bitcoin. However, there are other blockchains that are anonymous, or at least quite anonymous.
So, I mean, probably then if indeed the blockchain has this transparency dimension, this is not in the technology that you are going to solve that. You need the laws to avoid it. So you need governments to commit not to, and this is a big issue, and I don't want to now start a big discussion on that, but you need the laws to make sure that governments do not monitor everything on the internet or on the blockchain. So this would be my short answer, but I'm not sure if the technology is transparent, and it's a key aspect of it. I guess we should keep it probably.
Yeah, thank you. There has been another question, please.
Thank you very much. I'm certainly very intrigued by the opportunities which come with blockchain, but the topic for this afternoon is competition to governments, and I didn't hear much about competition to governments. So I would put you a question. There's the money laundering directive of the European Union, and at the same time, with the help of bitcoins, you can totally circumvent it. So is there not a competition to governments? I mean, in this way, that you can use this for transactions in the darknet and what have you. And I would really like to hear a bit more about these threats, which also exist. And maybe a technical or practical question. It's very interesting that Georgia went ahead with the registry, but could you tell us about the cost? Because I think governments would be most persuaded if they can save money with that, and not only if that is a stable and secure system. Thank you.
Okay, maybe I comment on this. We originally had foreseen a representative of BitNation here, and they go a step further. They not only offer blockchain as a tool for government, but as a tool to replace government functions. So there we have the competition to government, but of course your question is valid. If you can circumvent government rules, then it's also a competition to government. And so maybe you can answer the question, how much does it cost, and maybe why did you choose Bitcoin in the first place and not a different, maybe private blockchain?
So thank you for the question. So far, we're not paying anything for these transactions because we're acting together with the Bitfury group, and we have the memorandum, and we're not paying for it. But the price of the transactions are related to price of Bitcoin or whatever currency you're using in blockchain. So as for being cost effective right now, as I told you, we have not changed our registration system. So time frames and the price for the citizens and for us is still the same. But in the future, when we will start using the smart contracts, of course it will be cost effective because human resources will be replaced, and that can also be a competition to government. And also the notary offices will not be, like certified documents from notary offices will not be necessary, so it also will be cost effective for the customers. And this also will be the competition to governments, as the notary offices will not be used that much. So far, yeah, I cannot talk about prices that much, cost effectiveness, because we still have not changed our registration system.
Walid, you wanted to comment on it?
Yeah, about money laundering, and this is something that's been brought up. So if you think of it, the whole market cap of Bitcoin is just above 130 billion US dollars. But do you know how much corruption there is per year using regular fiat money on an annual basis? Can you estimate the global number? It's 1.5 trillion US dollars. So if you take it, it's nothing in comparison to what is happening in real fiat money. And in fact, Bitcoin is very useful, as mentioned earlier by the representative of Bitfury, in tracking certain amounts. Silk Road transactions have been easily detected, and this is because Bitcoin is pseudonymous, so you can actually track address to address how transactions flow. And if you know a particular address belongs to a particular individual, then that is a sign that you can actually knock on their doorstep. Another thing is to note that the government's use of blockchain for aid delivery, for transactions within government agencies will enhance transparency and eliminate a lot of this corruption. So I think that we need to flip it on its head, and instead of seeing the negatives on this technology, we'll look into the positives that can actually revolutionize and improve transparency within government transactions. And maybe that's why I think it needs to be referred to as a priority.
Okay. Do we still have time for some more discussion, or do you want to?
Thank you. Just one short clarification I would like to ask Mr. Brinje. Arvin from Diplo Foundation. Just you mentioned observatory and okay. So is it open? Can anyone join? Is there a place for researchers around Europe or I don't know, NGOs or other who is doing that kind of work? Thank you.
I must say I think it's closed now, but I would need to check. I can give the information later. Yeah,
actually, it is open as a forum. The forum,
it is
you can
open,
log in
okay.
as a forum, I think. Because
so you can still, yeah.
Well, there has been a selection process, and the selection process is closed. And but I've been told there will be another selection process, or there might be another selection process next year.
Thank you.
Another question, please.
Thank you for the interesting discussion and all the insights. Here's the question. Starting 2008, the anarchists were the guys who created all this. And step by step, when the events just developed, and nowadays we see big whales, like governments, like big financial institutions, who want their stake. What I really clearly see, the government wants, of course, all of them want development, but first of all, why they try to regulate or whatever, they want their share in terms of taxes, they want to keep the control of the economies, and AML, KYC is another topic, and maybe some others too. The big whales from the financial industries, of course, want their share of income. In terms of their businesses, they want to make money. So the question is, do you see this as a threat, or do you see it as a natural flow of events? While what I actually see is that the spirit of anarchism is kind of surpassed by the money of the big whales. Do you see this as a threat or as a kind of natural flow of events? Thank you.
Okay. Olga, you're the closest one to the financial sector.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Is it working? Yes, it is. Because it seems that, well, I've been a witness to several industries producing innovations for the last 10 years, like robotics or aerospace and defense. And I've been born in IT family, engineering family, and I've seen the internet starting over way before it was well known. And the thing is that all innovations go in this circle. People invent something, and then it started to adopt, and then governments take in and businesses take in. It's quite natural. What's interesting right now, I think, is that we're living on the cross-section of huge global trends, which we've never been before, and we've never seen before in the history. Emerging technologies, new cities, smart cities, connected societies, lifelong education, and we have a lot of questions we've never actually figured out before. And this is probably the most interesting part, and which is why we'll have to be in a dialogue, not like someone invented it and people are taking it on a different road. It's let's start talking, because punk rockers can always actually find a common ground with finance guys or with startups, because eventually they all reinvent something to make it available for people.
Thank you. We are here also concerned about human rights, and maybe we can ask some of the key participants, do you think blockchain is an opportunity for human rights, or is it a threat to human rights, or do you think both? Maybe Elena?
Hello, everybody. It's working? So I have an experience working as a lawyer at the European Court of Human Rights, and from this point of view I would like to share with you my considerations. And one of the biggest concerns, as I see it now, is storage of personal data in blockchain, because there is a huge problem. One of the human rights is the right to have his or her personal data to be deleted from registers. And I'm not sure if it is possible at all. And there are some cases of the European Court related to databases in France which store information about criminals, their fingerprints and DNA samples. And out of 4 cases I'm aware of against France, in 3 cases France lost because the requirement of the particular term for the storage of the data was not taken into account, and because there was, in some cases, there was no possibility to delete the data after the expiration of this term. So from human rights point of view, I think this is one of the concerns related to blockchain. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to comment on it? I think our time is almost up. Maybe if everybody can have a one-sentence only statement to conclude.
Starting on the reverse, I'd like to say that as human rights includes aspects that blockchain empowers, for example, the aspect of transparency. I'd like to know, my right as a citizen is to know how funds received by the government are used, for example. My right in protecting my viewpoint and expressing my opinion, which is one aspect that blockchains allow, which is freedom of expression. Equality, because on a public blockchain, everyone is equal in terms of ability to participate and permissionlessly. So it means that everyone's right is protected. You don't have a minister able to do it and the citizen not able to do it. So these aspects show that there is promise. And I'd like to note that if governments would like to use this opportunity, they need to forget their legacy ways of thinking and introduce new ways of thought.
Thank you. Olga, please, one sentence.
The data, privacy data belonging to people, which is, I think, a basic human right. and the ability to monitor the government's expenses and take on there is I think the basic democracy and human rights and people living in a common society. So, yes.
Okay. Mariam?
Well, ownership rights is one of the fundamental human rights, and that's what we're trying to protect with this new technology. And also the information about the owner, about this property itself, about public law restrictions and so on, according to Georgian legislation, is public, is stored on our website, so it's never deleted, let's say. So storing them on blockchain or not, it stays there. And I think we are actually having higher level of security with the blockchain of the human rights.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Nestor?
I agree with colleagues about the personal data and about the ownership rights, but also I think that one more important question is protecting the rights of cryptocurrency holders, of token holders. It's also one of the huge questions, and I think that the simple regulation is very important for solving this issue also.
Okay, thank you. Olivier?
So blockchain is definitely is going to redefine the internet, and I think it's a good development that we see. I mean, giving back control to the users, allowing more peer-to-peer transaction, I think that's, and in a secure way, I think that's very positive. We should encourage it. And the governments have the opportunity to be a bit innovative. So instead of regulating and then starting using the technology, they have the opportunity to test the technology themselves, to implement the technologies, and to use this knowledge to see what needs to be done in terms of regulation. So I hope we will follow this route.
Okay, thank you very much for the panel. Now we will have, as usual for the sessions, we will have the rapporteur putting it together for eternity, so we can document it. Please come to stage. You can put it to the screen?
Yes, he's going to do that for me.
Okay,
I
perfect.
just asked him, so
Okay,
it's going to be
please.
easier.
Please take a seat.
Right, it was quite challenging to summarize this rich panel. So I draft 6 bullet points. I start with the very general statement. The blockchain technology promises decentralized trust, which is independent from governments, public authorities, and traditional business institutions. One of the purposes of the European Commission is to build an internet that citizens can trust. One key technology for that is the blockchain. It will allow more direct and less expensive interactions. The Commission started with cryptocurrency and the financial sector and extended its action to public administration, logistics, healthcare. And the Commission has funded and will fund projects to ensure and improve the architecture of blockchain. Georgia implemented blockchain technology for public register, but also to register land, business, entrepreneurial, and non-entrepreneurial legal entities, among others. Blockchain technology can have great social impact. It can improve the detection of fake news or even preserve property rights. Internet is very instrumental to develop blockchains because of its transparency and decentralization. Also, blockchain gives agency to third parties and changes our current governance paradigm. Governments should use more blockchain technologies. Governments tend to over-regulate and should be cautious about regulating disruptive technologies to not do it in the wrong way. Blockchain will replace human resources and can compete with government, but it can also improve transparency to government transactions. And finally, regarding human rights, personal data should be able to be erased, and blockchain technology can threaten that. On the other hand, blockchain enable more transparency and participation, which are important human rights values.
Thank you. Do you agree do you want to have a last comment?
There was one, I think it's maybe a misunderstanding. When it's said that blockchains bring or give agency to third parties. In fact, blockchains remove agency of third parties and eliminate that because it's peer-to-peer. And I would have loved to have a resolution, or let's say a recommendation of not regulating before fully understanding and implementing and testing the technology. So that's one thing that
I think there has been an
bureaucrats
agreement
need to be
on that as well. And I think it's a very open approach of the European Commission to discuss first and then regulate in a very open way.
So, we use it for property registry, land and private property both, and the business registry comes next.
All right.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
This concludes this session, and it was a pleasure to be here. It was a pleasure to have you, distinguished panelists here, and thank you very much, and give them a big applause.